Obviously, I'm not going to illustrate any of these reasons in a literal sense, so you're going to have to use your imagination a bit. But this is the internet, so you guys will be fine. So when you're using a hose to water plants or something, it's difficult to control where the water is spraying when you grip it far away from the nozzle, and easy to control when you're holding it at the nozzle. The same applies to peeing, however, men aren't going to turn on their hose and just hope for the best. Usually. They're going to actively try to stabilize their pee stream. But less maintenance is required when the hose is held fixed closer to the nozzle, or when the nozzle is closer to the body. Or in other words, it's easier to water plants with a shorter hose. In general, materials are stiff, or in other words, we can think of them similarly to a mass spring system. Generally speaking, longer springs are less stiff than short springs because they're like taping two short springs together. When you pull on the first spring, it stretches some amount and pulls on the second spring, which stretches some amount, which gives us more stretch and less stiffness than just one spring. So why does this matter? Let's say you have a machine press that pounds out certain patterns for some reason, that operates at a certain number of thrusts per second. This thrusting load would be analogous to driving the mass spring system at a certain frequency. For most frequencies, the mass spring system doesn't really do anything, but when we approach a certain frequency, or in other words, the system's natural frequency, the system spirals out of control and failure can occur. The higher this natural frequency is, the more stable your system is, and the less likely something like this will occur. So since a shorter shaft length results in a higher stiffness value, the system will have a higher natural frequency and will be able to support more thrusts per second without failure. Honorable mention to a lower risk of heart failure because your heart doesn't have to pump blood as far. This obviously lets people live longer, which is usually a good thing, but maybe not so much in today's economy. Speaking of the economy, small pee-pee is less visible, so you can pretend to be a girl on OnlyFans to put food on the table. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk and have a good day.